Good day, friends. This is a voice-only video because of face. As you know, it's just a distraction. First of all, thank you for being here. Your presence is always very much appreciated. Today's topic is the reasons why a delayed maturity is a huge issue. There's no worse position to be in that of an old infant. Please never allow your family of origin to deprive you of necessity. They would deprive you of one of the greatest driving forces ever. Necessity will supersede lack of discipline and lack of drive. And discipline and drive are in high demand these days and extremely scarce. This lack of necessity is so detrimental because it widens the gap between mistakes and punishment. The confidence given by the security your parents give you is your ruin. You need not grow up and abandon the comfort of your luxuries. Otherwise, you will develop a dependency on them. This dependency is going to detriment you twice. It will not let you grow out of it, and once you try to pave your own way, and you're likely to compare results, your self-esteem might get damaged by the lack of immediate success compared to your previous condition. What you do on your own will probably not be as successful as what you were experiencing with your parents, and you might get hurt. Your results might look meaningless compared to what your parents got you used to. Now, let's not blame it all on your folks. You had a choice and chose the easy path. So let's at least share the burden of the immature adult you have become. This is the path to becoming independent and consequentially mature. We're mistaking power as individuals of power, which we yearn to become, versus empowered individuals, which should be our actual scope. When the goal is confused between being powerful or empowered, the road to getting there is obviously uncertain. Hard to know where to go if you don't know what the goal is. Power is derived from authority and competence, and not the contrary. It is not that by being in a position of power, we automatically derive competence and authority. Doesn't work that way. We might get respected for our power position out of fear, but we will never have the same respect that is awarded when your competences are recognized. What really worries me is how easy it has become for young adults to postpone maturity. Let's not forget that one way to describe this desire to delay maturity is called the Peter Pan syndrome. Let's go through this. This is a rendering of the Peter Pan story that I have derived from a lesson by Jordan Petersen, where the characters are anthropomorphized, whose actions I will try to decipher and explain the allegoric meaning in the story and how they link to our title. First of all, let's understand that the name given to Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, its author, is not casual. Pan is the ancient Greek word for all. In this case, the meaning associated with Peter Pan is relative to the potentiality present in all children. They have pan possibilities, all possibilities, well ahead of them, which they can develop whichever way they please. I personally believe that J.M. Barrie intentionally named Peter Pan in a way to describe the children's ability to be both anything they want through imagination and by their future unlimited potential. It is quite easy, given the examples of adults around him, to understand why Peter Pan has no intention whatsoever of giving up his plenipotentiary status and turning into an adult. Why would anyone in their right mind want to turn into an adult if all you see is Captain Hook anyway? Another key concept in the Peter Pan allegory deals with the concept of aging and dying. The reference to the clock inside the alligator is quite clear in this sense. Time will eat you, and in Hook's case, it already got a piece of him, his hand. And this terror forces him to be such a bad person. Peter sees this and has one extra motive: to relinquish growth. This desire to remain in Neverland costs him a mature and possibly fruitful love with Wendy, who has accepted to grow up and eventually die, leaving him with the ephemeral love of a fairy, Tinkerbell. If he grows up, he will gradually lose his ability to fly, meaning he will lose some of the powers that imagination has given him. He will have to take on adult responsibilities and will be forced to abandon the carefree joy of childhood. Maturing is hard because it requires a very identifiable and costly sacrifice. One has to sacrifice the illusion of becoming what one desires in potential to what one can become in reality. And this defining moment might scare most, as it is possible that deep within you there lies the truth about your lack of abilities or lack of drive. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you know exactly who you are. You know that you're not as good as you want to believe, and there's no way you want to grow up and manifest those shortcomings. You much prefer to think you're still the best, rather than find out you're not. Eventually, this will happen to you anyway, but it is advisable to guide the process instead of having it imposed by society. When you are in your early 20s, it might be acceptable that you're still choosing a path, but the same undecidedness will be frowned upon in your 30s, as you're not a youngster anymore. Past age 30, the immature adult will be ostracized as a weirdo. Later, we can further develop the concept of growth through trial and error and the appropriate age for each mistake. I believe that this delayed maturity is only acceptable now because our society has changed and growth can be postponed without much consequences. In the past, one did not have the time to delay maturity because responsibilities came regardless if you were ready or not. And the life expectancy was so much shorter that there was no space for an extended carefree period. The problem arises when you are over 40 and still behave like a teenager. No one's going to be thrilled with you. What have you been doing for the past 25 or odd years? What have you been up to? When you were younger, all there was potential. Now you have neither potential anymore because you do not have the time to develop whichever potential you had, if any. Basically, you're just potential with little chance and few tools to develop it. Society has not much to offer, and you have a lot less to offer to society. Society has a definition that I really don't agree with. It calls these men trapped in childhood. I don't agree because someone, by definition, is trapped when held against their will, whilst these men have chosen not to mature. As it was far simpler to avoid maturity than to face responsibilities, freedom of choice, and the result of one's actions, and the responsibilities of answering for one's actions. Let's clarify, these men do not avoid adulthood, mainly to dodge responsibilities as such, but for the freedom involved in growth. Freedom is like a gate that you have to cross to move along in your path of growth. And like some gates to pass, you have to pay up. The cost of this freedom is what young adults have to pay for. This is the freedom that we are afraid of. A limitless life scares us, as no set boundaries require us to set our own, require us the courage to make mistakes and assume ownership of these shortcomings that our limited initiative or ambition can pose. One thing is to say, and maybe even believe, that I can be anything I put my mind to. Another is realizing that that's not the case. It's a rough awakening when you give it all you got and it gets you nowhere. Even though that is seldom the case, the fear of one's limitations can stun the growth process. It's best not to find out what I'm actually worth. It's like stage fright. I'd rather not find out whether I'm afraid or not. I'd rather not find out whether I'm good enough or not. I might just sit here and wait and see what happens. Let men make mistakes in the correct time frame. Do not overprotect your children, as it is advisable to make mistakes earlier in life rather than later. A mistake made by a 10-year-old will tend to be solvable and generally will not involve others in a very significant manner, whilst a grown man that makes a mistake is likely to involve others. The grown adult, if he has not been accustomed to the life of a grown-up, can, in his mistakes, drag others down with him. For example, a wife and a child can be implicated if the mistake is grave enough. This cannot happen to a mistake by a young child. What I'm trying to say, this is to say the mistakes have a learning curve, and as time passes, the experience gained will keep us out of more important dangers. But if the maturity process has not been completed properly by the time adulthood sets in, the issues resulting from these mistakes are probably going to be disproportionate. Why does it take so long to grow up today? Why are some young folks unready to transition into adulthood? Have we made the adult world too hard and complicated? And we have to admit, the adolescent world has never been so appealing. Is this why they're not willing to move on? It must be so because I see so many adults that embark into prepubescent behavior and dressing styles that there must be some truth that adolescence is very much more appealing now than it ever has been. Are we not making adulthood that alluring so young men and women prefer not to transition? Why have we allowed individuals to postpone maturity? Is it a cultural issue? Are the possible dichotomies the issue? Everything that we are not is bad? We have not gotten them used to anything else other than convenience. I mean our teenagers. They see everything that is not convenient as a pain in the rear. They feel entitled to more and better. We do not divide matters into good or bad. We just simply state them as better or worse. The world of hyperbole. The world that requires sweat and tears to get anything accomplished is blatantly refused by the immature adult. They want it all and they want it now. And if it's not the top job with the highest pay, they don't want it. As if they were all entitled, not having earned anything, but for the sole reason that they want it. We have removed any expectation and patient anticipation for a coveted certain gift. I want it now. I don't want to save my allowance to be able to afford it. I deserve it now for the sole reason that I want it now. Anticipation is for losers, and the digital revolution has taught us that it can be done overnight, and instant gratification is a new religion. What will eventually be the fate of an old infant? The life path of an immature adult is a downward curve, because for as much as the mind refuses to grow, refuses to age, the body begins its downbound trajectory from the day you're born. You cannot bargain with reality forever. You can postpone growth, but one day the reality of your mortality will rear its ugly head. Growth is, in general terms, the ability to face the unrelenting truth of our mortality. We can state that we will all grow up eventually. Only some get to do it on their deathbed. Your immaturity sort of accrues. The longer you wait, the more expensive the price to pay, with the highest costs borne upon you when facing your mortality on your deathbed. This is motivation and inspiration in the dark, and that is all I have for you today. Thank you. If you appreciate this channel, please consider pressing the like button, subscribing, and maybe sharing with a friend. Again, thank you.